call Matilda Starbuck?
Hello. Good, thanks. How are you?
Pretty good. Take a seat. Before you tell your story or give any evidence today, are you happy to make a promise to tell us the truth?
Yes.
Great. And you've got some more there?
That's okay, that's fine.
Dr. Dwyer. Miss Starbuck, can you please tell the court your full name?
Yes, it's Matilda Grace Starbuck.
And where are you currently working?
I'm currently working at Hobart Private.
Matilda, can you pull that? Terrific. And it doesn't amplify you much, but it does record it. You were interviewed on the 4th of June 2020 in relation to your work in Yuendamu as a nurse and to provide any information that you might provide after Kumanjayi's death, correct?
Yes.
Have you read that interview recently?
Yes.
You're now, I think, 24 years of age, is that right?
Yep.
Where did you first do your nursing studies?
In WA
And when did you graduate?
in 2018.
After you graduate, did you participate in a postgraduate remote area program?
Yes.
What was that?
So it's a mentored program in a remote Aboriginal community, which I was placed in Yuendamu, where you were mentored by other RANs and another mentor, Brian, about gaining the skills and knowledge to become a remote area nurse.
Okay, so a RAN stands for Remote Area Nurse?
Yes.
Yeah. So you mentored for a period of how long?
So it's a 12-month program, initially more support, and you worked with other remote area nurses in the consult until you had the confidence and competence to have your own consults.
Why did you want to do remote area nursing?
I was very much interested in a challenging role for my nursing and having a broader scope of practice, increasing my skills and knowledge, which I found remote area nursing to be, and then also having a new experience working in the Aboriginal communities.
You make a comment in your interview about how remote area nurses have got an extended scope of practice. What did you mean by that?
So given the limited resources and remote location, you were able to, your skill levels and knowledge had to be, I guess, a bit higher because you're dealing with things without other doctors, say in emergency situations, and then you didn't, I guess, have all the equipment and resources that you'd have in a big hospital. So you were able, I guess, to be able to do more in that setting to get them to help in terms of healthcare.
Was part of the reason that that job was of interest to you was that you were going to learn an enormous amount in a short period of time?
Definitely.
So it can really accelerate your career, can't it, to go and do some work in remote communities?
Yes.
You grew up in Western Australia, is that right?
Yes.
Whereabouts in Western Australia?
Just south of Perth.
Did you grow up with Aboriginal people?
Yes.
Did you have any involvement with Aboriginal people living in remote areas of Australia before you went to Yuendamu?
No.
So Yuendamu was your first posting as a nurse, is that right?
Yes.
And who was your mentor?
Brian Clode.
Was Brian there in community?
Yes, he lived out there with us.
Before you went out to Yuendamu, did you have any knowledge about the Coniston massacre that occurred in 1928?
Only briefly.
How did you come to know about it?
During the pre-cultural awareness.
All right. Can you tell us about that? Going back a step then, what was the pre-cultural awareness you're telling us about?
Sorry, during our induction, I believe it was briefly spoken about during our day cultural awareness aspect of orientation.
Okay, so the orientation or induction, are they the same things?
Yes, yep. Sorry.
Where did that take place?
In Alice Springs.
And who provided that orientation or induction?
Management for Alice Springs. I'm not sure exactly the name.
But someone within NT Health, is that right?
Yes.
And it went for one day?
Yes.
And what sort of things did you learn about?
They just went through, I guess, the cultural aspects to be aware of, things to, be aware of in community, of how you might change your mannerisms or things you may do to be respectful.
Okay. So I just want to break that down a little
Yeah.
bit. But I think I was asking you about this, the terrible history from 1928,
Yeah.
where there was a massacre in the areas around Yuendamu. You had never heard about that before that day of induction, is that right?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And so you learnt something about it as part of the induction process
I
during that
believe so,
day.
yes.
What else did you learn about the history of the Yuendamu and surrounding areas?
I can't remember, sorry.
Did it shock you when you learnt about that massacre?
Yes, definitely.
That was nothing you'd ever learnt about in school?
Not that I can remember.
And did you learn about any other massacres in terms of the history of Aboriginal people in this country at school?
Yes.
When you were participating in that orientation during the day, did you learn anything about how Yuendamu as a community we know it today came to be in existence?
No.
Did you learn anything about the recent history of Yuendamu in terms of the challenges for the community in the last, say, 2 decades before you went out there?
I don't believe before I went out there, but when I was out in Yuendamu, I was told about the events that occurred where people were relocated to Adelaide.
And that was around 2012, is that right? Was it one of the other nursing staff who told you about that?
Yes.
During that one-day orientation, did you learn anything about the type of health issues that you would encounter in community?
Briefly, yes.
What did you learn about that?
In the orientation?
Yeah.
Just about, I guess, what we would be caring for, some of the things that would be more prevalent, such as diabetes, chronic kidney disease, skin issues.
Did you, prior to that orientation, or that one-day orientation, I take it you didn't know anything about Yuendamu or the Warlpiri people?
Not specifically, no.
During the course of that day, were you told anything about Warlpiri culture?
I guess in terms of Indigenous culture more broadly.
When you went into the community, was there any further orientation that took place?
We had orientation when we first came out to community, and we were driven around Yuendamu, showing where all the camps were, which are kind of like divided camps. And then we were introduced to the Indigenous workers.
Who were the Indigenous workers when you were there for your year?
Nola Fisher, Mary Butcher and Javison Williams.
And did you participate in any sort of orientation which involved those 3 people?
Not that I can remember.
When you were in Yuendamu, you were there for a year as part of that program, is that right?
Yes.
So that was, I think, from April 2019 through to March 2020.
Yes, correct.
Did you learn any Warlpiri language during that year?
Yes, I tried.
You tried? How did you learn language?
Through the members that would come in that we looked after, and then also the school had a teacher that would do Warlpiri lessons, so we went along to a few of those.
When you say we, who went along to a few of those?
Myself and a couple other med students, when they were there, we went down.
What was the role of a graduate nurse in the community?
So initially it was a more, you worked with the other nurses and then learnt from them how to do treatment consultations, increasing the skill set such as like cannulation, taking bloods, doing fractures and everything like that, and then working within our scope from the CARPA manual, which is like our guidance for treatments. And then as we progressed throughout the program, we then were able to take consults more independently, where we were able to discuss with our mentors and other nurses what our findings were, what we thought was happening, and what our plan for treatment would be. And then they would be able to assist us if we were, if we'd interpreted it correctly. And then as things again progressed along, we were taking consults independently and doing call-outs.
When you were involved in consultations, either independently or with somebody else, did you ever find that communication was difficult?
At times, yes.
Why was that?
Sometimes the language barrier could be a little bit difficult.
Did you learn anything about what to do, firstly, if the language barrier was difficult?
Yes, so we have the Nola and Mary and Jabby that I guess we could discuss, but they weren't official interpreters through like the interpreter system. And then also using the very small amount of language that I knew, trying to intertwine that as well. And there's also an app that you can use that translates from English to Warlpiri that you can use.
What about cultural norms or different things that you should do to respect patients when they come in?
Yeah, so language, body language was discussed in that initial cultural orientation. So just being aware, I guess, of our body language, eye contact and that kind of thing we were told about.
What were you told in relation to eye contact?
Just that like sometimes you don't maintain, I guess, the eye contact, and that having a conversation without that continuous eye contact would be normal, which may be a bit different, I guess, when we have a conversation.
Did you see any male patients?
Yes.
In relation to the health issues for the community, you've now had an opportunity to work in Wadeye after Yuendumu. Where did you leave after Wadeye?
I went to Townsville to do my postgrad diploma of midwifery.
Okay. And now you're in Tasmania?
Yep.
Was there anything unique now about the health problems that are experienced in Yuendumu?
Yes, I think seeing, I guess, the knock-on effects of how different diseases and that can progress if not caught early enough, such as like hypertension leading to chronic kidney disease, diabetes, and then seeing how important, I guess, that youth intervention would be to ensure the health outcomes of community members, as well as skin issues, which can lead to rheumatic heart disease and further heart problems.
What type of youth intervention did you come to recognise would be really important for the Warlpiri people?
I guess early recognition of things such as skin sores, scabies, and being able to, and then just general hygiene as well. A lot of ear issues as well, which can obviously affect hearing and subsequent problems in later life.
During the year that you were there any mental health services that you referred patients to?
Yes, so we had a mental health nurse and a psychologist that would come out and visit the mental health patients.
Am I right that there was nobody with mental health training, or including either a nurse or a psychologist, who lived permanently in the community?
No, not specifically mental health training.
Were you ever told that it would be part of your role to provide any counselling?
Yes.
To community members?
Yes.
Do you think you did that?
I tried my best, yes.
In what form? What sort of form would counselling take?
In general discussions, if you had someone coming in with mental health, just for their normal, say, depot, which is the injection that they'd get 3 to 4 weekly, you'd have a discussion, I guess, about their mental health, how they're going to be able to make sure that the medication that they were taking was appropriate, and helping with the symptoms, as well as if you had a mental health crisis, going through that process as well.
Was there anybody in the nursing clinic who specialised in young people?
Like a child health nurse? Or
Yes.
Yes.
There was?
Yeah.
Who was that?
Kim Richards.
And was Kim Richards based permanently in the community?
No, she drove in and out.
Did you enjoy working in the community for the period you were there?
Yes.
Why?
Both professionally and personally. Professionally, I guess the work that we were doing, the skills I was able to learn, the knowledge I was able to learn, and then personally the relationships I was able to build with not only my team members but the community itself. I found that very rewarding.
Did you, for example, have the phone numbers of any of the Warlpiri people who were in the community?
I don't remember specifically for Yuendamu, no, sorry.
What about for your Aboriginal team members who were part of the clinic staff?
No, I didn't have their phone numbers.
In terms of a young nurse going out there, I'm thinking about the recruitment for nurses in Yuendamu. Who did you spend time with outside of your clinic hours?
We mainly socialise with the nurses and doctors in our clinic team.
Did you come to know that there was an organisation called Purple House that provided dialysis support?
Yes.
Did you meet the staff members at Purple House?
Yes.
Did you ever socialise with them?
No.
Did you have their phone numbers, for example?
No.
When you were there, how many staff members were at Purple House?
I don't know specifically.
There are nurses, we understand, in the aged care facility, is that
Yep.
right? Did you come to meet them when you were there for the year?
Yes.
Do you remember how many nurses there were?
Not specifically, sorry.
Did you socialise with them?
No.
There are teaching staff in the community, both Yappa and Cardia, is that right?
Yes.
Did you socialise with any of the teaching staff?
Not specifically. One of our nurses, her partner was a teacher.
What about WIDAC? Did you spend any time with the WIDAC workers?
Not socially, no.
Did you go to any of the activities that were offered by WIDAC at night time, like basketball or movies?
No.
And so do I take it then in terms of the stakeholders, and I'm thinking here about council workers or family and children or police, you didn't socialise with any of those people?
No.
You really spent time after work with your colleagues from the clinic, is that right?
Yes.
And that was your cardio colleagues from the clinic, is that
Yes.
right? So you were a close-knit group during that period that you were there, is that correct?
Yes.
I want to ask you now, Ms. Starbuck, about an issue with break-ins that we've come to be aware of. When you were interviewed in June 2020, you said this to the police officer interviewing you. Initially, we just had like your normal break-ins, community break-ins, and that kind of thing. But the week prior, it probably ramped up a little more. Earlier in the week, our clinic manager, Luana, had her house broken into. Can you describe for us the accommodation that you were living in at Yuendamu?
Yeah, so they are duplexes. So they're like the two houses together, but you had your own yard. So where I was living, there was two sets of duplexes.
Okay. And I think I'm going to hand you this document. This is your drawing.
Oh, yes.
At the end, it doesn't need to go on the list, but it appears, Your Honour, the transcript of Ms. Starbuck is at 911, and this appears as an annexure to 911 MS01. What you do there is draw 4 boxes to indicate 4 duplexes side by side, is that right? Or is it two duplexes?
2 duplex,
Okay.
yep.
So there was Luana and Vanessa in one and yourself and Janine in another, correct?
Yes.
And then you've drawn some lines outside of that. Does that indicate fencing?
Yes, I assume so.
All right.
And then there's a road that follows that outside of those lines.
Okay. In terms of the houses for nurses, Her Honour will have an opportunity to see them herself when she goes into community.
Yep.
But what was the fencing like during the period you were there?
It was the colour bond fencing.
And so it didn't change at any time you were there? It was always that colour bond fencing,
Yes.
correct? Okay. You were asked what you meant by normal break-ins in the interview with police. They said, what did you mean by the usual break-ins? And you said, so we kind of get a bit, usually it just becomes a norm, I guess, in that you've got kids in your backyard all the time. They come in and out. They'll be looking for cigarette butts. They might try your door handle. But generally we didn't report that to the police, because they've got enough on, and it was just kids coming in and out, and you weren't going to stop them pretty much. So I just want to stop there for the moment. Until November 2019, is that an accurate description of what you experienced in the house?
Yes.
Okay. So you might come home and there would be kids over the colour-bond fence, is that right?
Generally, they wouldn't be there when I'd walk into the house, but you could definitely hear them at night time when you're awake.
Did that happen from the time that you got there in the community in April 2019?
Yes.
Were you concerned about that at all?
I believe initially I was, because obviously I wasn't used to having people in my backyard, but then it did become like the norm. So you just kind of got on with it.
Am I right in thinking that it was always your belief that it was, as you put it, just kids?
Yes.
And did you get the impression that they were in the backyard because they were bored?
Yes, and looking for cigarettes.
You didn't think that they were going to break into your house and do you any harm, did you?
No, not once I'd gotten used to it.
So were there any occasions when you reported anything to the police up until November 2019?
Not to the police, but I remember putting in one risk man which is our, I guess, health service risk system, about when my door handle had been tried.
Okay. When was that?
I don't remember specifically. It was at the start of the time I was there, but I remember I believe it was kids trying out my door handle at my house.
And what locks did you have on your door?
There was a few locks. I believe there was about 3 on the door.
When did you feel that you could make yourself secure in your own home by using the locks?
Secure enough, yes.
What you explain is that the situation appeared to change in the first week of November, and Luana had her house broken into. Is that right?
Yes.
At any time prior to that, were you aware of a nurse having someone enter into their house?
Yes.
What was that situation?
Robin's house, but I don't remember the specific details.
Okay. We've got the promise entry for that, and that occurred in 2018 before you got there.
Yes.
And was that something you just learnt about?
Yes.
Who told you about that?
One of the nurses.
And do you remember the name of the nurse who told you that?
No, sorry.
What did the nurse tell you?
I can't remember, sorry.
Were you told about that as a warning to lock your door?
I think it was just an understanding of making sure that your home was secure.
Did you ever have any alarm system on your home?
No.
So in terms of making the accommodation secure, you had the collarbond fence you told us about.
Yep.
But kids would get in over that at night. You had the locks on your door.
Yes.
Was there anything else?
No.
You told us about someone trying the door handle and you made a risk man. That was earlier in the year, soon after you arrived.
Yep.
Did that happen more than once?
Not that I was aware of.
And did anybody ever actually get into your house at any time?
No.
You explain in your statement that at about 1:15 a.m. on the 9th of November, Vanessa called you a bit distressed that she could hear her house being broken into and also Luana's.
Yes.
Prior to that time, had you been discussing with the clinic staff that there had been an escalation in break-ins?
Yes.
What did you know about prior to that phone call at 1:15?
I knew about Luana's house being broken into and then her car being broken into the next day.
So Luana's house was broken into on the 6th of November. That was a Wednesday. You knew that the windows of the car had been smashed the next day.
Yep.
Did you know that Luana had gone into town to get that window repaired? Okay. Anything else before you get this phone call at 1:15?
No. Not that
So when you got the phone call, you said Vanessa called me a bit distressed. How did you know she was a bit distressed?
I guess her voice and then what we were discussing.
What did she say to you?
That her house had been attempted to be broken into and that she could hear Luana's house being broken into as well, which was like, I guess, making her house rattle while they were over there.
Did she wake you up with that phone call?
Yes.
Okay. What did you say back to her, to the best of your memory?
I believe she had said that the police were on her way, so I said that I would come out with her to see the police and then make sure that she's okay.
When the police arrived, you did go out to speak to them,
Yes.
is that right? Do you remember the names of the police officers who came at that time?
I believe it was Julie and Chris.
And when they came, whereabouts did you speak with them?
Outside of Vanessa's house.
They didn't come into your house or Vanessa's house?
No.
How long were they there for at the time?
I would say approximately 20 minutes.
And what was Vanessa like at that time?
A bit shaken up by what had happened.
This might sound like a really stupid lawyer's question, but when you say a bit shaken up, was she angry, teary, strange? Can you describe for us how she was?
She just, I don't know the word specifically, I guess a bit shocked about what had happened, and then about, I guess, the safety of us having our houses broken into, voicing those concerns.
To the best of your memory now, what did either Julie or Chris, the two police officers, say?
They had said that they thought they knew who may have been leading the break-ins, and that there was a plan in place. They didn't mention anything else about that, and it was mentioned that a person had lunged at police officers with an axe prior when they were trying to arrest them.
So they thought it might have been, this is what you say at page 5 of your interview, they thought it might have been related to the fella who was in community, but they didn't specifically say or anything like that. When you say they thought it might be, was that Julie and Chris talking together or one?
Yes.
Talking together?
Yep.
Okay. Did they mention any names?
No.
Did you know anything about this person who was supposed to be in community?
Not specifically, no.
Did they say anything else at the time about the break-ins?
No.
Did they say anything about the plan they had in place?
They didn't, sorry. It was just that there was a plan.
So at page 14 you say they were just saying that they think they knew who was doing the break-ins, that they were going to try and do something about it to help, so then the break-ins would stop.
Yes.
Did you accept that? Was that reassuring to you?
Yes.
What happened after that?
After that, Janine came out, which was my next door neighbour, and then we had noted that her partner's car had been broken into as well, and the back window was smashed. After the police left, we then, myself and Vanessa, went to Janine's, and we sat and had a bit of a chat for about an hour or so before we went to bed.
What was that chat about?
Just that the break-ins felt a bit more specific to healthcare staff, and I guess that's a bit unnerving that it felt more targeted towards us.
That was quite a bit different to what had been happening before, wasn't it?
Yes.
Kids in the backyard, they might try your handle.
Yeah.
And then you can go to sleep because you don't think that they're getting in.
Yeah.
Quite a bit different to what was being reported then, wasn't it?
Yes.
Was there any discussion during that hour you were having a cup of tea with your colleagues about what to do about that?
No, it was difficult to, I guess, for ourselves to know what could be done to stop it.
Was there any discussion about telling the Aboriginal staff at the clinic what was going on?
Not that night.
And was there any discussion when you were having a cup of tea about getting elders involved in trying to assist the staff?
I can't remember specifically.
The next morning when you woke up was the 9th of November, so the same morning.
Yeah.
I take it you hadn't had very much sleep if you'd had a cup of tea with your colleagues?
Yeah, by the time we went to bed it was around 3:30.
Okay. And what time did you get up?
Probably around 8ish.
And what did you do after you got up?
Just a normal morning, and then I got a phone call from Janine around 9 o'clock, where she said that we would have a staff meeting, a meeting with the people who had had their houses broken into.
That was a Saturday, the 9th of November.
Yep.
Were you on call at all?
No.
The clinic is normally closed on the weekend, is that right?
Yes.
But there is always somebody on call,
Yes.
correct? Did you know who was on call?
I can't remember, sorry.
What had you planned to do over the course of that weekend for your 2 days off?
I can't remember,
Were you
sorry.
going to stay in community?
Yes.
And were you aware at any time that there was a funeral in community that
Yes.
weekend? How did you become aware of that?
The clinic is notified when there is a funeral because we arrange the morgue to be open to facilitate them to have the body.
In either your orientation or during your months in Yuendamu prior to November, did you come to appreciate that Warlpiri people have important ceremony around funerals
Yes.
and that there is a funeral and sorry business?
Yes.
And did you come to appreciate that that was very significant for Warlpiri people to be able to engage in their funeral process?
Definitely.
Do you feel that that was something that, firstly, you respected
Yes.
and that the Warlpiri people would rely on nursing staff to give them access to the morgue so that that process could take place?
Yes.
And that's why it was important to be for the clinic staff to be notified so they could assist the community?
Definitely.
When you were told by your colleague that there was going to be a meeting, did that take place at somebody's house?
Yes.
Was that Janine Walker?
Yep.
She the midwife?
Yes.
Okay. So you went to her house?
Yes.
And who else was there?
There was myself, Janine, her husband, Pardo, Julie, her partner Craig, Lisa, her partner Rex, John, and Vanessa.
No nursing staff? No police staff, is that right?
No police.
So when you say Julie, you mean another
Oh,
nurse?
yes, sorry.
Okay. And there were 2 people on the phone, is that right?
Yes.
And that was Helen Gill?
Sorry, initially it was Helen Rudolph and Brian Clode.
Was Luana on the phone initially?
I don't believe initially. Myself, Janine and Vanessa thought that we wouldn't let her know initially about the break-ins just because they were in Alice Springs for a bit of respite, and we would fix up their house and let them know at a later time so they could have a bit of not stress about it, I guess.
Okay. So this is at the early discussion around 9 o'clock.
Yes.
And can you remind us do you know the position of Helen Rudolph?
Yes, she was a remote area nurse as well.
Where was she based?
She was based in Yuendamu, but herself and Brian had gone into Alice Springs.
So it was really a discussion amongst the nursing team about what to do, is that right?
Yes. Oh, but yeah, about what had happened and that things were escalating.
Was there anybody from management at that early meeting?
No,
How long did that meeting take place for?
I can't remember, sorry.
And what was discussed there in terms of the next steps?
I don't think we discussed about what would be happening in the future, just what was happening at the moment, what had happened the night previously, and I guess that we were concerned that things seemed to be escalating.
Okay. When you say we were concerned, did you get the impression that everybody felt the same?
At that first meeting, yes.
What was the feeling in terms of whether or not, well, firstly, you've told us the feeling was that things were escalating.
Yes.
Was there a feeling that there were staff at the clinic being targeted?
It felt more targeted towards the staff.
Why was that?
It appeared to just be our houses being broken into in that week, and that it was consecutive nights.
Was there any discussion as to why that might be happening?
Not particularly.
Did you have any alcohol in your house?
No.
Did you know that colleagues had alcohol in their
Yes.
houses? Was there any discussion that the break-ins might be in an attempt to get access to alcohol?
It could be.
Okay. Was that discussed at that meeting?
Not that I could remember.
In terms of trying to understand if it was a target towards nurses, why that was happening, was there any thought of discussing that with elders or other yappa in the community?
During the week, obviously our Indigenous workers knew about Luana's house being broken into, and then that the car had been broken into. But we hadn't discussed at that point about a community meeting, no.
Had you ever been to a community meeting in the time that you were there?
Not that I can remember.
After that I withdraw that, after that meeting just between the nurses, what happened?
I believe Cassie came over and we'd been told that she had spoken to Helen in town on a private phone call, and that we were having a phone call with Helen.
And that was Helen Gill, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then did you participate in a further meeting where Helen Gill was on the phone?
Yes.
Where did that meeting take place for you?
At Janine's.
And how long after the first meeting was that?
Pretty quickly afterwards.
Okay. And
Yeah.
who was involved in that meeting?
All the people previously plus Cassie, and we had Luana on the phone as well.
And Helen Gill on the phone?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And how long did this second meeting go for?
I'm not too sure.
Did you do any of the talking?
I probably wouldn't have said much.
And did anybody take notes in that room?
No notes.
Who did most of the talking at that second meeting?
I believe Janine.
What did Janine say?
Just explain what had happened again the night prior, and that it was feeling more targeted, that we felt the break-ins were escalating, and that I guess it was feeling a bit more unsafe.
How were you actually feeling?
Personally, I felt nervous, I guess, about what could potentially happen if things were going to continue, and more towards the health staff for, I guess, Saturday night, being by myself in the house, and then previously what Julie had said about the people breaking in, the person who they thought was breaking in had gone at police with an axe, and then seeing what they'd used to try and get into Luana's house was a bit unnerving, that they could potentially enter my house and have the same things.
So you just said seeing what they used to try to get into Luana's house. What do you mean by that?
So when we were at Luana's house in the early hours of Saturday, they had tried to get into the back window again, and then there was rakes and shovels and pickaxes at the back.
Do you mean that you actually saw the rakes and shovels and pickaxes?
Yes.
So they had been discarded in that area, is that right?
Yes, they were under the window, and then the police collected them.
So at that meeting, after Janine explained that, did anybody from management say something? Did Helen Gill say anything?
Yes, I don't remember the specific conversation now, but it was brought up that it was recommended that we were removed from community.
Who recommended that?
Helen.
What did she say when she recommended that?
I don't remember specifically, but I remember at the end it was, I guess, the direction that we were being removed from community.
Do you remember Luana saying anything at that meeting?
No, sorry.
Did anybody speak against moving out of the community?
Yes, Cassie had.
What did she say?
She wasn't keen to leave community.
Did she say why?
No.
Do you I know it's a long time ago now, but just to the best of your memory, how did she express that she wasn't keen to leave community?
She felt quite forthright that she wasn't wanting to leave community, but that Helen had said if one goes, everyone goes. Like, it's not up for discussion. We're all being removed.
During that meeting, was there any discussion as to who would be told that you were going?
In terms of community?
Yes, starting with them.
I don't remember a direction of like a list of people to notify, but we knew roughly who to notify, obviously police, community members, and that was Cassie and John, I believe, that went out. Their plan was to just drive through community and let as many people know as they could.
And we can ask Cassie about this afternoon, but just trying to think back to that meeting, do you remember Helen Gill saying anything as to who should be told?
No.
Do you remember any discussion of consultation with community before you moved out?
No.
So a decision was actually made you would move out without consulting anybody, is that right?
I believe so.
After that meeting,
Can I just ask, did anyone raise what the police had said that they had a plan?
I don't remember in that conversation discussing it with Helen.
Did anybody raise the fact that there was the funeral that the community had on that weekend?
Yes, there was concerns of how to facilitate the transfer of the body.
Okay, and that was discussed at that meeting, was it?
I can't remember if it was with Helen or afterwards.
Who raised that concern?
I don't remember.
And what was the discussion?
It was just how, if we were being removed from community, I believe the funeral was around 2 p.m, and that how we would help to make sure that they would have access to the body.
Who was going to make sure they had access to the body?
I don't remember.
At page 18, when you were asked about what happened after the meeting, you said, this is in your interview, I'll just read it to you. You said, and then when town called, they spoke about removing us from the community. You're referring to Helen Gill?
Yes, sorry.
And we were talking about that generally. Sometimes we didn't feel quite supported by management. So when they were just like, they were finally supporting us, we should just go and do what they say and take us out of community. And then hopefully community would get the idea that we can't be broken into, we can't have our houses and cars broken into, then that takes us off the floor to be able to provide for community. I just want to ask you a couple of questions about that. When you say sometimes we didn't feel quite supported by management, what did you mean by that?
I don't remember at that time, sorry.
Thinking back on it, do you know what you must have been trying to communicate there?
I think there's different aspects, I guess, of being a remote clinic, where there may be times where we've asked or discussed something which we'd recommended that may not have been taken on board.
Can you give us an example of that?
I can't remember at this time, sorry.
Was there anything to do with your security that you'd asked for or recommended?
Not that I can remember, no.
When you say hopefully the community would get the idea that we can't be broken into our houses and our cars because the services would be withdrawn in effect, was that something that the nurses were discussing, that it was important that you leave and then the community would get the idea that they can't allow the break-ins?
I think that was, separated. We were removed for our safety, but that it was in the back of our mind that also collectively that community and I guess the broader health service would understand and know that we can't provide a health service if we don't have secure and safe housing for, and just in general personal safety for nurses as with any other government group in community.
Did any of the nurses that you heard expressing their views seem angry about what was happening in the houses?
Angry about our houses being targeted?
Angry towards community.
I'm not sure about anger, but generally a level of frustration that it was continuing, and then I guess being a bit unnerved about what could potentially happen.
Given the level of frustration, was there any discussion at all about engaging the community in trying to help nurses?
To stop the break-ins?
Yeah.
I think community generally knew we had people in our backyards prior, and obviously community knew about the break-ins. It's a very small place, so generally there's not much that can happen that everyone doesn't know about.
Okay, but it's a place of about 900 to 1,000 people, fluctuates, the population. And what Her Honour has learnt is that these, in terms of kids being in the backyard and these break-ins, there was a very small number of people in the community. I'm not downplaying the fear for you, but was there any discussion at all about how the broader population of Yapa might be able to help the nursing staff?
A discussion on the Saturday?
Yeah.
I don't remember specifically. No.
And what about any time prior to that, in terms of kids being in the backyard?
Yeah, we had gone to a safety meeting, I believe, with police. I don't remember the dates of it, but we had gone with police. It was open to all community members and stakeholders about the continued, I guess, kids being in our backyard and what we could do about that. And I guess the police chatting to us about why things may be occurring the way that they're occurring.
When did you go to that meeting?
I don't remember the date, sorry.
Just if we use November 2019 as a benchmark, can you roughly remember how many months it was before then?
Maybe a couple months, but I wouldn't know accurately.
Were there any Yapa people at that meeting?
I believe so.
Okay. Do you remember their names?
No, sorry.
Was there any action plan or discussion about what might happen after that?
Not really.
One other thing that you said in your interview at page 21 is that you said, I felt like town was supporting us in relation to the decision to leave. And if it was going to make a change, and I guess what was happening in community, there'd be less break-ins and the community would kind of get it, that you can't be doing this stuff, otherwise you're not going to have a health service. Was that part of the reason for moving out was to send a message to the community?
No.
Those break-ins were not acceptable?
No.
Why do you say that so emphatically?
I believe that part of my statement, and there's another part related to that. I'd just like to apologise for the way in which I spoke. I believe that the way, I guess, it's being interpreted after it's been written down, and I can understand the way that you guys are seeing it, wasn't the intent in which I meant it. And I'm happy to explain it better.
Yeah, please do. Just tell us in your own words what you meant.
Yeah. So I believe part of that statement and another section in the statement that I spoke on around that same theme, what I meant to say that we had been removed from community for our safety, and that I had presumed that it would just be for one night, and that on return to community, that community, I guess, in reflection of that, would understand and see why we had been removed and that it wasn't safe for us to be in community. And that, I guess, if the safety of the nurses or any other stakeholders is at jeopardy, then obviously that jeopardises their healthcare system and our ability to provide healthcare, in which that is why we're there and that's what we enjoy doing.
So, Ms. Starbuck, you can have both, can't you? That you genuinely had a reason to be fearful. You described why. But you also, don't you want to have the community understand that you nurses were feeling fearful?
Yes.
And they need to be able to feel secure to provide a service?
Yes.
And you wanted the community to get that message to you and other nurses?
Yeah.
Do you think, looking back, and I appreciate that you were the most junior one there, and this is really early in your career, but it would have been better in hindsight to be able to discuss all those fears with the community and ask for the community's support going forward before the clinic staff moved out?
In hindsight, yes.
Do you recall what time you left on the Saturday?
I would say before 2-ish.
And who did you leave with?
I drove out by myself, and I believe Lisa and Rex were following in front or behind.
And at any time before you left, did you speak to any of the community members?
I believe briefly there was a car when we were having the meeting outside of Janine's. I believe it was Javison Williams who came by because, again, obviously news kind of spreads quickly. And so briefly discussed about the break-ins, but I can't remember the exact conversation.
And when you say briefly discuss, was that you discussing it with him, or is it somebody else that you were with?
Yeah, we were still all in our team.
Okay.
Yep.
And you don't remember anything Jabberson said?
No, sorry.
Was Jabberson asked his opinion about whether you should go?
Not that I'm aware of.
Was he asked into the meeting?
He wasn't asked to attend with the meeting with Helen, but we did have, I guess, that discussion with him outside of the house.
Do you know why he wasn't asked into the community, or Nola, or the other Aboriginal lady who was working in the clinic?
I think that we'd called it for the people who was having their houses broken into, and at that time we weren't aware, I guess, that Nola, Jabby or Mary had been targeted or had any break-ins themselves. So I guess we were just discussing with each other about our houses being broken into.
Do you know now whether Nola, Jabby or Mary had their houses broken into?
I don't believe they had.
Do you think, looking back, again, just learning the lessons, it would have been a good idea to invite those staff members into the meeting with you? Were you, I think you said earlier that Cassandra and John were going to go and tell some community members that clinic staff were leaving. Were you with them when they did that?
No.
Did you overhear any discussion that Cassandra had with community members?
I believe afterwards there were conversations with her on the phone, but I didn't hear what the conversations were.
Okay. Do you mean conversations with Cassandra and community members?
Yes.
Okay. And how have you come to learn about them?
What the conversations were? I didn't hear the conversation.
Okay.
Well, I can't remember, the conversation that was had on the phone. But I remember afterwards a group of us had said that the way in which she was speaking to the people on the phone may not be the best.
Why not?
Just the manner in which she was speaking, we could see that community might not be appreciative of that.
Was she, do you know who she was speaking to?
No, sorry.
And were you actually in the vicinity when that conversation took place?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm just trying to guess about why other staff were concerned. Was she speaking a bit sharply to members of the community?
Possibly, but I can't remember the conversation, sorry.
Was there a perception amongst the other clinic staff that Cassandra had been rude to a member of the community on the phone?
Yes.
And that if she continued to do that, then she would lose the community's respect?
Yes, and that they may ask her to leave.
And do you know what she was speaking to the community member about?
No, I don't, sorry.
Did it appear to you that on the day you were moving out, Cassandra was particularly upset?
Not upset, I don't think.
Angry?
I'm not too sure about her emotion.
What about frustrated? Did she appear to you to be very frustrated?
I can't remember, sorry.
In fact, Cassandra, you came to know, was asked by the community not to come back, is that right?
Yes.
Do I take it that that didn't surprise you, given that other clinic staff also had concerns about the way she'd spoken to the community?
Yeah, I don't believe it did.
You went from the community, did you go straight to Alice Springs?
Yes.
And you understand that keys were dropped to Yullamu staff members, keys to the clinic on the way back?
Yes.
You didn't do that though?
No.
You say in your statement to police you did feel quite bad that they were getting lumped into servicing like 120 people plus 1,000 in Yullamu?
Yes.
You mean by that, on reflection, you felt bad for the Yullamu staff to have to do both of those communities?
Yes.
Do you recall any discussion at either of the meetings on Saturday morning that additional staff members could be based in Yullamu?
No, I don't remember.
If someone had asked you to do that, would you have been prepared to?
So at the time in the program that I was at, I don't think it would be entirely appropriate for myself to have gone. But as a remote area nurse afterwards, yes, I would have.
Was there any discussion about ways to keep you safe, before the decision to leave the community, about ways to keep you safe rather than leaving? For example, staying at somebody else's house, reinforcing the house?
Not that I can remember.
You returned, or I withdraw that, you were, I think, with your colleagues when a call came through from Julie Frost to say that somebody had been shot in Yuendamu. Is
Yes.
that right? Did you have anything to do with making any arrangements to get emergency care into the community?
I got MRAC's number, which is the Medical Retrieval Service.
How did you do that?
We have it on our phones, and I gave that to Julie.
Okay. So did you speak to Julie?
I can't remember whether it was via phone or via message to her.
Was that something that you were tasked to do by one of your colleagues? You returned to the community on the 12th of November, is that right?
Yes.
And you attended a community meeting that you talk about?
Yes.
Was that, how many people were at the community meeting, do you think?
There was quite a lot. I don't know the number specifically.
There were police at that meeting, is that
Yes.
right? And there were also nursing staff,
Yes.
management from NT Health,
Yes.
and YAPA members of the community,
Yes.
correct? You recognise that some community members were angry and upset, is that right?
Yes.
And could you understand, I would draw that, when they were angry or upset, did you hear anything that was specifically being said?
I don't remember, sorry.
Could you understand why they were upset?
Definitely.
Did some of their anger or upset appear to be directed at nursing staff?
Yes.
You just can't remember specifically about what was being said?
Yes.
Do you remember that David Rees was there from Northern Territory Health?
Yes.
Do you remember hearing him speak to community members?
Yes.
What did he say?
He had the opportunity to discuss with community and let them know, I guess, why we had been removed from community.
And what did he say to the community members as to why you had been removed?
He had said that we were scared.
And did he say that at the meeting?
Yes.
And you heard him say that?
Yes.
And what reaction did that get?
From community?
Yes.
A negative reaction.
A negative reaction. Do you remember anything that community members said?
No.
How did you feel about the negative reaction coming to something that David said about the nursing staff?
How did I feel about community?
Let me ask you a different question. Did you think it was helpful, the way that David expressed it to the community members?
No, unfortunately I didn't.
Did you feel that made it worse for you?
Yes.
And that the community would then blame you?
Yes.
Because it looked like it was the nurses deciding to move out.
Yes.
And did you in fact feel that it was management's decision to move the nursing staff
Yes.
out, and that management should have owned that decision
Yes.
and explained to the community why management made the decision that nursing staff
Yes,
should leave?
definitely.
Okay. And that would have made it easier for nurses to continue in the community?
I believe so.
This is what you say in your interview about why Cassandra was not allowed back into the community. You actually stayed there till March in the next year, is that right?
Yes.
You say in relation to Cassandra, you asked why she wasn't allowed back, and you say it was, I believe it was community didn't want her back. The morning when she was liaising with community elders that we were leaving, she didn't quite go about it the right way. I heard some of the phone conversations and we discussed it afterwards about that. We'd said to her in that time, if she kept speaking to them that way, she would be kicked out of the community.
Yes.
Does it refresh your memory listening to me read that you actually heard some of the way she was speaking?
I must have, yes.
And the police officer, then Senior Constable Duncan, says, do you know who she was speaking to over the phone? And you say, I think Richie Robertson. And then she tried to find Jimmy Langdon but wasn't able to find him. But it was Richie or Eddie Robertson that I think she ended up having the conversation, who were the grandparents who were hiding him and Lottie. We were told they were hiding the young guy. Who were you told that they, or where did that information come from?
I believe it was afterwards.
Okay. After Kumanjayi had passed away. And Officer Duncan says, so Cassie was talking to them over the phone or in person? And you say, on the phone, using this call phone. And you could hear what Cassie was saying to Eddie, and you said, only bits and pieces, but I wouldn't be able to say for certain. But I know it wasn't how she should have been speaking to them.
Yes.
Is that right? And that's because she was speaking in a way that was rude. Is that right?
Yes. It's not how we generally speak.
And Officer Duncan says, I know you can't recall word for word, but what was the conversation about? And you said it was about the funeral. So there was going to be a funeral that afternoon on the Saturday, and they were worried that they wouldn't be able to have access to the body to do the funeral. And then there were conversations, this is hearsay, but someone had said that apparently Cassie had told them that she'd leave them in the sand or something like that, but I can't say for sure whether that conversation it was just relayed afterwards.
Yes.
Who relayed to you that conversation?
I don't remember.
And Officer Duncan says, leave what in the sand? And you said, leave the body like outside the morgue. Do you have any further information about whether or not Cassandra did say anything like that?
No, I don't. That was just second-hand information.
Did that second-hand information come to you from a Yapa community member or Cardia staff?
Cardia staff.
And you go on to say, so they were quite anxious about the funeral not being able to go ahead, but I think Cassie just got a bit caught up with that we were leaving and trying to get it through to them that we were going and not quite taking into consideration their feelings about the funeral and the kind of things with that. You go on to say a bit more about that, but do we take it from that the tone that Cassandra was using was concerning you as a young nurse? You didn't think that she was being respectful to... You thought that you needed to be respectful to community members, particularly when they were going through a funeral?
Most definitely.
Okay. And it concerned you, the way that she was speaking to community members at the time?
Yes.
And you can understand, can't you, why Kumanjayi's family, I would draw that, why community members might be particularly concerned that they're going to be left without access to the morgue?
Definitely.
So you can really appreciate why they might still be upset or hurt about what happened there.
Yes, yes.
Did you ever speak with anybody in the community while you were there till March about that? Any Yapa?
About the conversations?
Yeah.
No.
How did you get along with community members when you went back in November after Kumanjayi's death?
It was initially difficult to rebuild that rapport and respect, but I guess eventually things started to become more normal like it was before the incident.
Did you continue to work with your Aboriginal teammates, with Jabby and Mary and Nola?
Yes, yep.
Did they help you to restore some trust in the community?
Yes.
And were they kind to you when you came back?
Yes.
I'm going to just ask you some questions. I've probably got another 5 minutes, Your Honour, if you're finished, if you're content for me to finish. This was at the very start of your career. Told us you've gone on to work in Wadair.
Yes.
How long did you work there for?
12 months.
Did you enjoy your time there as well?
Definitely.
When you were in Wadair for that year, was there any time when the clinic was closed?
We had reduced services due to unrest in community.
Reducing services, what did that involve?
It meant that we just provided emergency services.
But remained in the community, is that right?
Yes.
When that happened, or how often did that happen in Wadair?
Very often. Oh, sorry, the reduced services?
Yes.
Not that often. The unrest, quite often.
Okay. So with reduced services, less than 5 times, is that right?
I would say roughly, but I'm not sure.
Okay. When that happened in Wadair, were you involved at all in informing the community members as to why that was taking place?
Not that I can remember.
Okay. Were you aware at any time when the clinic staff were withdrawn from Yundamu in November 2019 that there was actually a policy that guided... Okay. You've since come to be aware of that, is that right?
Yes, yesterday.
So you first found out about that yesterday, is that
Yes.
right? So even when you were in Wadair, you weren't aware that there was a policy to follow?
No.
Did you participate in any lessons learnt team meeting after Kumanjayi's death?
I believe at Yuendamu we had a person come out and speak to us about the events, but I don't remember what the conversations were.
Where was that person from?
I can't remember, sorry.
Was it someone within NT Health?
I can't remember.
Okay.
Sorry.
You haven't seen any document that was produced in relation to a lessons learnt outcome? Okay. I anticipate submitting to Her Honour that before the clinic staff were withdrawn from Yuendamu, there should have been more effort to liaise with the community to see if anything else could have been done to stop the break-ins without requiring withdrawal.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I think that would be an important step, looking back in hindsight, that should have been made.
And do you think that it would be good for nurses in your position to understand who are the elders and emerging leaders that you can go to discuss problems before they escalate?
Yes.
So having a body that you can reach out to and phone numbers you can call of the Yuppa community members would be important to a young nurse like you?
Yes. I'm not too sure about the phone number aspect, as generally sometimes the phone numbers change quite a lot, or a lost phone or something like that.
So just having people...
Being able to contact, yes.
Because you generally know where people live in
Yes.
the community, don't you? So having a way to escalate your concerns with Yuppa community members would be useful?
Yes.
One other topic I wanted to ask you about was withdraw that, just before I move on from that. Was that possible in Wade? Did you know any of the elders or emerging leaders in Wade that you...
Yes, I had quite a lot of community members' phone numbers, and they would discuss with me concerns they had, as well as if we had concerns.
Okay. And was that useful to you?
Yes, yep.
Was that a formalised process, or did you just come to know about who those people
more
were?
informal.
When you were at Wade, did you have social and emotional wellbeing teams?
Yes, it was newly rolled out when I moved there.
Okay, then you're going to be in a great position to tell us about them. I think we heard yesterday that they would come into Wade once a month for a period of time. Is that right?
Yes, during the COVID time, obviously services were a bit difficult, but they would come out probably twice, at least 2 weeks of the month. I can't remember specifically, but they'd come out Monday to Thursday.
And what was that team made up of?
They had a social worker and a psychologist.
And what sort of things would they do in the period they were there?
They'd assist with housing, any financial aid schemes, NDIS. They were very, very helpful with NDIS, helping community members with that, as well as emotional wellbeing. Catherine would help with psychology appointments to discuss any concerns. If we felt we needed to refer community members to them, we could do that. And then if the community member was happy to, and then she would engage with them either in the clinic or outside the clinic to assist in any way she can.
And did you think that there were people who really benefited from that work?
Yes, definitely.
In Wade, did you notice a group of young people and teenagers and young adults who really needed the help of the social wellbeing teams?
Yes.
And did they appear to be getting some good help to address some issues for
Yes.
them? Do you think that would be useful in Yuendamu?
Definitely.
Do you think it would be useful to have permanent teams based in Yuendamu?
Yes, or at least coming out for the week. If they couldn't stay over the weekend, coming out Monday to Thursday or Monday to Friday.
Did you come to learn during your period in Wade that there were a number of young people who were the victims of serious trauma?
Yes.
And you understand now, don't you, that there are some people have experienced generations of trauma in
Yes.
Yuendamu. Do you think it's important to have trauma counsellors based in Yuendamu?
Definitely.
Just one last topic, which is about the comparisons between Wade and Yuendamu. Every community is different, of course.
Yeah.
But when you were in Wade, did you socialise outside of clinic hours with other stakeholders?
Yes.
What sort of stakeholders?
Teachers, tradespeople, and sometimes police.
And was that an enjoyable way of living in the community?
Yes.
Did it make it easier for you to be based in the community, to have those outside?
Yes,
Social
it was a good social.
Where did you socialise? Was there a place to go?
No, we socialise at each other's houses, or sometimes you'd go camping or fishing.
Do you know why there was that difference in Yuendamu, where you were more isolated in the clinic staff?
I'm not too sure, sorry.
Thank you, those are my questions.
You've talked about just at that time when the houses were being broken into, safety fears.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have those same fears in Wadair when there was trouble and unrest?
To a certain extent, but I think I guess the time in Yuendamu with people in Wadair, we didn't really have people in our backyards. We had the see-through mesh fences at our houses. In terms of the unrest, that was more in Wadair, but it didn't feel targeted towards staff. It was generally concerns or issues between different families. The clinic staff weren't a part of that. We just provided the healthcare service.
And were there any other features of the housing in Wadair that you mentioned a couple there? Any other features that made it feel safer for you?
No.
We might take the morning adjournment.
Yeah, that's okay.
All stand, Coronial courtroom temporarily adjourned.
Hold anybody to this, I'm just going to sense how long everybody's going to be, so